They called me dead weight, so I gave them the mortgage bill and moved to Florida. I was folding towels in the kitchen when I heard them. Their voices were hushed, but I'd lived long enough to know when people were trying not to be heard. "You need to say something," Clara whispered, her tone tight with impatience. "Your mother can't live with us forever. She's not helping, she just takes up space." "She raised you," Michael mumbled. "That's not the point," she snapped. "We've got bills, stress, and she just sits there all day. She's dead weight." I froze. The towel in my hand slipped onto the counter. "Dead weight." "I heard you," I said softly, stepping into the doorway. Clara flinched. Michael turned, eyes wide. "Mom?" "That's not what she meant," he stammered. "It is," I said. "You just didn't think I'd be listening." They said nothing. I walked back into the kitchen, folded the last towel with shaking hands and placed it on the stack. My heart beat steady, slow, but strong. I had lived through far worse than words, but still, some words stayed. That night at dinner, I spilled a bowl of soup. My hand trembled, arthritis had been cruel lately, and the bowl slipped just as I set it down. "Seriously?" Clara hissed. Hot broth soaked the tablecloth, dripped onto her lap. "I'm sorry," I murmured, reaching for a napkin. Before I could move, she slapped my hand away, hard, then slapped my face. It wasn't the sting that hurt, it was the silence that followed. Michael just stood there. He didn't yell, didn't ask her what she thought she was doing. He just looked at me, then looked away. It was in that moment I realized he wouldn't defend me, not even against this. Then came the sound of a door opening. "Mom?" Anne's voice, my daughter, my youngest, the one I hadn't seen in over a year. She stood at the threshold, suitcase still in hand, face stunned. She had just come from signing her divorce papers. I knew this because she had called me 3 days ago, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. She saw my red cheek, the spilled soup, the way I was holding myself together with nothing but shame. Then she saw Clara. And she didn't hesitate. The slap echoed. Clara staggered back, stunned. "You touch my mother again and I will break both your hands," Han said through clenched teeth. Michael jumped up. "What the hell, Han? You don't live here." "You don't get to come in here and act like some hero." Anne turned, slowly. "You let your wife hit Mom and said nothing. You let her call Mom a burden and just stood there like a coward." "She's not helping us," he snapped. "She just takes up space, just like you, a divorced parasite who ran back to her mother the second life got hard." Anne recoiled like he'd hit her too. "You're just like her," he spat. "Both of you, useless." That's when I stepped between them. "Enough," I said. They both froze. I looked at Anne. "You're not useless." Then I turned to Michael. "And you're not my son anymore." His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I walked away, sat in my chair by the window, the one they all said I stared out of like a ghost. But I wasn't a ghost. I was very much alive, and I was done. There was a time I believed that giving would guarantee love, that the more you gave, the more you'd be cherished. I believed that loyalty, when paid forward in silence, would one day echo back in warmth. I was wrong. I sold my house to help Michael buy his. It was a small brick home I had lived in since he was 9. The paint peeled on the porch. The plumbing was stubborn, but it was mine, bought with every graveyard shift, every penny I saved by mending clothes and skipping vacations. That house saw me through widowhood, through Michael's college years, through the hardest winters of my life. When he and Clara were expecting their second child, they came to me with wide eyes and hopeful tones. "There's this perfect house, Mom," Michael said. "Good schools, a yard, room for everyone, but we're short on the down payment." I didn't even blink. "How much do you need?" They said a number. I wired it within a week. I didn't ask to be on the deed. I didn't want them to feel burdened. Just a home for the babies, I told myself. They'll know what this meant. They didn't. I moved into their guest room, a space between the laundry and the garage. No window, a mattress on the floor. But I told myself it was enough. I was close to the grandchildren. I could help. I could belong. And I did help, more than they'll ever admit. I watched the kids every weekday. Pickups, drop-offs, fevers, nightmares, homework, bedtime songs. I cooked dinner most nights, washed their clothes, repaired ripped backpacks, never asked for a cent. Then one month, I noticed an envelope on the counter marked "Final Notice." The mortgage. Michael brushed it off. Clara had to leave her job early. Things are tight for now. So I paid it, quietly. I set up a monthly payment to cover half the mortgage, never told them. I didn't want to embarrass him. He was my son. Month after month, I paid, and they never asked where the money came from. Maybe they didn't care. Clara changed. Slowly. At first it was small things, rolling her eyes when I offered to make lunch, correcting me sharply when I told the kids old family stories. "Mom, don't confuse them," she'd say. "They're learning a different way now." Then came the bigger things. "I think we need more space," she said one afternoon, glancing at the toys cluttering the living room. "Maybe if the guest room were open, we could turn it into a playroom." I said nothing, just nodded and gathered my knitting. Another day, I overheard her on the phone. "No, she doesn't pay rent, but she eats, uses water, electricity, it adds up." And once, while handing me a shopping list, she added, "Might be nice if you started picking up your own groceries. I mean, you do eat a lot of yogurt." Michael never said a word. When I looked to him for comfort, he looked away. The worst part? I kept trying. I baked her favorite bread, even after she called my recipes dated. I folded her laundry when she left it in the machine for days. I sewed buttons on her blouses when they popped. She never noticed. And when she did speak to me, it was to remind me, "You're lucky we have space for you. Not every family does." She said that more than once, as if the thousands I gave, the meals I cooked, the nights I sat awake holding her crying child, were all a favor I should thank her for. And Michael, my sweet boy who once built me birthday cards from macaroni, he just let her. He stood beside her, silent. One evening, I burned the rice. Clara walked into the kitchen, sniffed the air, and laughed. "Well, I guess you really are getting old." Michael said nothing. I sat down on the back steps that night, the Florida heat pressing into my skin, and stared at the horizon until it blurred. How many times had I given them the last slice? The warmest blanket, the best part of me? I thought of the house I gave up, the porch swing, the daffodils, my name, carved into the beam inside the pantry right beside Michael's in messy fourth-grade letters, gone, given away. Still, I stayed, because mothers stay, even when they're treated like furniture, even when their kindness is repaid with contempt, even when their name is no longer spoken with reverence but as an inconvenience. But something had shifted in me the day Clara slapped my hand away from the soup. The moment her fingers met my face, the second Michael didn't move. That shift turned into resolve, and that resolve would lead me to do something I never thought I had the strength to do. I called the bank on a Tuesday morning. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply confirmed what I already knew, that my name was still listed as the payee on the monthly mortgage, even though I wasn't on the deed. They pulled up the file. The woman on the other end was polite, too polite, the way people are when they're reading numbers that don't make sense. "Yes, Mrs. Harper, it looks like you've been making the partial payments since July, and also an additional lump sum last December." "That's correct," I said. "And would you like to continue these payments?" "No," I said. "I'd like to stop today." Silence. "I'd also like the remaining balance, all future communications, and every financial document going forward, redirected to the homeowners, Michael and Clara Harper." She paused. "Of course, I can finalize that request today." "Please do," I said, "and email me a copy of the confirmation." I hung up, opened my laptop, and printed the letter the bank sent just 2 hours later. I folded it neatly and slid it into an envelope with the final receipt of my last payment. That afternoon, I made soup. Lentil, Michael's favorite once upon a time. I baked bread. I set the table. I placed 3 plates out, and in the center of the table, I laid the envelope beside the salt shaker. When they arrived home, I greeted them like nothing had changed. Clara walked in first, pulling off her heels and dropping them on the floor, as usual. Michael followed, his phone still pressed to his ear. Dinner was quiet, the clink of cutlery, the ticking wall clock. When the plates were nearly empty, I reached for the envelope and placed it between them. "What's that?" Clara asked without looking. I wiped my hands on my napkin. "That," I said, "is the last mortgage payment I will ever make." She blinked. "Excuse me?" I turned to her. "I called the bank this morning, told them to send everything to the legal homeowners, you two. From now on, all responsibility is yours." Her mouth opened but no sound came out. Michael finally looked up from his plate. "Mom, I heard you, I said. Last week, in the living room. I turned to Clara. You said I was dead weight. Clara scoffed. That's not. Yes, I interrupted. It is. And now I'm removing the weight. Michael's face turned red. His eyes dropped to the table. I've paid this house for 3 years, I continued. Half the mortgage, the down payment, groceries, repairs. I've cooked your meals, raised your children, stayed quiet when you rolled your eyes, and turned away when you turned cold. I reached down, lifted my small suitcase from beside my chair, and set it upright. But now, the givers are done giving. Clara stood up, her voice rising. You can't just leave. What about the kids? You can't just drop this on us? I can, I said. And I am. Michael looked like a boy again, one who'd done something wrong and didn't know how to undo it. Mom, please. Just, let's talk. I turned to him. My son. You let her slap me, I said, low and calm. You let her call me names, and when your sister stood up for me, you called her trash. You stood behind her every time, even when you knew she was wrong. His eyes filled with tears, but not a word came out. I'll be gone in the morning, I said. You'll get the keys back. You can convert the guest room. Do what you like. Where will you go? He whispered. I smiled. Where I'm not dead weight. I wheeled my suitcase to the bottom of the stairs, climbed up slowly to gather the last of my things, a few sweaters, a photo album, and my late husband's watch. That night I slept like a stone. In the morning, before the sun rose, I brewed coffee for myself one last time in their kitchen. I placed my house key on the counter. No note, no goodbyes, just the click of the door behind me and the long, quiet walk toward freedom. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I packed what I needed, a week's worth of clothes, my birth certificate, my pension papers, the recipe box with my mother's handwriting, and the photo of Michael and Ann as toddlers in the backyard, mouths sticky with watermelon. I left the house key on the kitchen counter, next to a cooling cup of coffee. One last act of routine, no farewell note. At 5:40 a.m., I rolled my little suitcase down the street to the bus stop, the wheels clicking softly against the pavement. The morning air was thick with quiet. A neighbor watering his lawn waved. I waved back. He had no idea I was disappearing. The Greyhound bus was half full, the vinyl seats cracked with time. The air stale but not unkind. I sat near the window and watched the city shrink behind me, the place where I had lived like a shadow in someone else's house. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to grieve. I rode through Georgia's sleepy hills into the warm breath of the South. Hours passed in silence. I ate saltines from my coat pocket. I wrote a few lines in my journal, then stared out at the endless fields. I thought about Aunt, the daughter I hadn't seen in over a year. She lived in Sarasota now. Last time we spoke, she was whispering through tears. I think I'm done. I just don't know how to leave him. I knew that voice. I had once used it myself. When I finally arrived, the air in Florida felt different, softer somehow, even in the heat. I stepped off the bus into sunlight and cicadas, my suitcase bumping behind me like an old friend. Anne lived in a modest apartment complex just outside town. I walked the last 2 blocks. Her building was beige, with chipped railings and a cracked sidewalk. I climbed the stairs to her unit, knocked twice, and waited. When she opened the door, her breath caught. "Mom?" she whispered. She looked thinner than I remembered. Her eyes were tired, her lips swollen beneath a faint smear of makeup. She had always been good at covering bruises. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring. Neither did she. We just looked at each other. 2 women, worn thin from being quiet too long. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. No words, just arms, just warmth, just the kind of embrace you only give when something inside you breaks open. I held her for what felt like hours. We didn't need to explain. We knew. We had both survived houses where love had conditions, where silence was safer than truth, where the cost of staying was your own reflection. Inside, the apartment was small, 1 bedroom, second-hand furniture, the air conditioner rattling like it might give up at any moment. But it was clean. Lived in. Real. I was just making tea, Anne said, wiping her face. I nodded, sat down at her kitchen table, and let her pour me a cup. There were no questions like, "Why are you here?" or "What happened?" She just placed the cup in front of me, sat across from me, and reached for my hand. And we sat like that, no explanations, no justifications, just two women who had finally come home to each other. And SIS women didn't speak much the first few days I stayed with her. She moved quietly around the apartment, like she was always bracing for something, for someone. She flinched when her phone buzzed. She kept her back to windows, and at night, even in her own home, she locked every door, twice. I didn't push. I folded laundry while she worked late shifts. I made soup and left notes by her coffee mug. I swept the floor. I waited. One night, as the rain tapped gently against the window and we sat together on her worn couch, and finally said the words I knew were buried deep in her chest, "He calls me garbage." I turned toward her, but she wasn't looking at me. She stared at the floor like she couldn't bear to see my face. "Not just when we fight," she whispered. "All the time. When I forget to take out the trash, when dinner is late, when I speak too softly, too loudly, when I breathe wrong." Her hands were clasped in her lap, knuckles white. "He took my car keys last month, said I didn't deserve to leave, that if I left, no one would take me back, that even my own mother wouldn't want me." She looked up at me then, eyes filled with something far deeper than sadness. Was he right? My throat tightened. I reached for her hand. It was cold, trembling, so different from the small fingers I used to braid hair for before school. "He's wrong," I said firmly. "He was always wrong." Her lip quivered. She tried to speak, then broke down instead. She sobbed into my lap like a child again, and I stroked her hair like I had when she was 5 and afraid of thunder. That night, she told me everything. How the bruises weren't always from falling, how he checked her phone every night, how he once made her kneel on the bathroom floor for an hour because she bought the wrong kind of milk, how she stopped laughing 2 years ago and hadn't noticed until now. I didn't cry. I just held her. And when her tears dried, I said softly, "If you can't leave yet, I'll take you. I'll carry you out myself if I have to." She didn't respond, just leaned into my shoulder. We spent the next few weeks slowly untangling her life. She started saving her paychecks in a hidden envelope. I helped her make a list of what she'd need to take. We practiced what she'd say, who she could call, where she could go. But fear is a stubborn guest. It clings. "I don't want to start over," she whispered one morning. "I'm 39. I'm tired. What if I fail?" I took her hands in mine. "You're not starting over," I said. "You're picking up where someone else tried to end you." And then something shifted. She began to walk straighter. She smiled, not often, but when she did, it wasn't forced. She stopped checking the window every hour. Then, one Sunday afternoon, she stood in the doorway, holding a thick envelope with trembling hands. "Divorce papers," she said. I signed them. My breath caught. "Are you sure?" I asked gently. She nodded. "It's time." I rose from my chair, walked over, and wrapped my arms around her. "You saved me," she whispered. "No," I said. "We saved each other. Because in her freedom, I found mine too." We found the apartment by accident. It was a small place on the edge of town, tucked above a seafood market and one street over from the beach. The paint was chipped, the plumbing temperamental, but the windows caught the sunrise like they were built to remember beauty. Anne stood in the doorway with the lease in her hand, eyes shining. "Can we really do this?" she asked, almost afraid to hope. "We already are," I said. We moved in a week later with only what we needed: a few bags of clothes, a kettle, 2 folding chairs, and a second-hand sofa that smelled faintly of cinnamon. We didn't bring the past with us, just the parts of ourselves we were still learning to love. Our days settled into rhythm. Anne sold handmade jewelry online, something she'd once done as a hobby in college. I helped with the shipping and packaging, learning the little codes and tools she used. We set up a small corner of the living room with boxes, twine, and tissue paper. Every sale felt like a small victory, a piece of her independence, delivered. I started baking again. Just small batches: oatmeal cookies, banana bread, butter rolls. We posted a few photos, and within weeks we were taking local orders from neighbors and tourists. They called it Mother and Daughter Goods. The name stuck. We didn't make much, but we didn't need much. Each morning I rose with the light, brewed strong tea, and sat by the open window with my journal. I wrote not to remember, but to release. Pages and pages of everything I had held back, the disappointment, the heartbreak, the slow dying of a mother's hope, but also the small joys, the sun on An's shoulders, the way the sea smelled at 6 a.m., the laughter, real laughter, that slowly returned to her voice. She would come home from the market with sand on her feet, her eyes soft, her shoulders no longer hunched. She began to paint again, seashells, postcards, little frames we hung around the apartment. At night, we'd sit on the floor and eat simply, rice, vegetables, sometimes a single grilled fish with lemon. We played soft music, talked about books, about nothing. We didn't talk about Michael, or Clara, or the house I'd left behind. We didn't need to. One night, as I was closing my journal and getting ready for bed, I glanced over at An. She had fallen asleep on the sofa, head tilted back, arms crossed, a faint smile on her lips. She was dreaming, but not the kind of dreams that came with nightmares or panic. It was the kind of smile a child has after a day in the sun, the kind of sleep that only comes when you finally feel safe. And in that moment, watching her at peace, at home, in her own skin again, I felt something inside me shift. I knew I had done the right thing. I hadn't just left a house. I had walked away from silence, from being unseen, from being needed only when convenient. I had chosen to live, not as an obligation, not as a quiet supporter in someone else's story, but as a woman who still had chapters left to write. I closed the light and whispered, "Thank you." Not to God, not to fate, to the part of me that refused to be erased, to the woman who packed her suitcase, boarded a bus, and found her way back to her daughter, to the mother who stayed long enough to say, "We're not broken, just rebuilding." And for the first time in years, I slept with no weight on my chest. The phone rang on a Tuesday. I almost didn't answer. An Egloon was in the kitchen, humming while she stirred soup, and I was at the window, clipping dead leaves from a basil plant. The number flashed on the screen, a familiar area code, a number I hadn't seen in months. I picked it up, not knowing why. "Grandma? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, my heart tightening. There was a pause. "Grandma," she whispered, "Mom and Dad they're scared. The bank sent a letter. They said something about foreclosure." I sat down slowly. "Dad's been crying," she continued, barely audible. "I heard them fighting last night. He said they're going to lose the house." Another pause. "He said it was your house first." I didn't answer. Then the phone clicked. She'd handed it off. "Mom," Michael's voice, shaky, older. He hadn't called me Mom since the day I walked out. "I'm sorry," he said all in one breath. "I should have stopped her. I should have said something. I was scared and stupid and I thought we had time. I thought, why are you calling me now?" I asked, not cold, just quiet. He didn't respond right away. "I need help," he finally said. "We need help. They're going to take the house. I tried to fix it, but it's too late." And? I know I don't deserve to ask, but please, come back. We can make space for you again. Clara. I laughed once, soft, sad. He stopped talking. I took a deep breath, looked around the little apartment that smelled of lavender and lemon, where the walls were thin but the air was warm. "Michael," I said gently, "do you remember the day Clara called me dead weight?" His breath caught. "Yes. Do you remember what you did?" Silence. "Nothing," I answered for him. "You did nothing. And then you called your sister a leech. You stood by while I was humiliated, and now, months later, you remember I exist, because the bank does too." He sobbed once. "Mom, please." I closed my eyes. "I was a burden to you then," I said, "but I'm not anymore." And then I said it, the sentence I'd been saving, not for revenge, but for clarity. "I used to carry that house. Now I carry myself." He sniffled. "What do I tell the kids?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "Tell them their grandmother's doing just fine, and maybe one day, when they grow up, they'll understand what you didn't." Then I hung up. No goodbye, no promises, just peace. Some mornings, Anne and I walk barefoot on the beach. She always carries her sandals, even though she never wears them. I bring my journal, though some days I don't write a word. We just walk, side by side, letting the tide nibble at our toes, letting the wind take what's left of the past. There's a rhythm to the ocean that feels like forgiveness, not for others, but for ourselves. We don't talk much during those walks. We don't need to. Anolito is healing in her own way. She laughs now, not too loud, but real. She sings when she washes dishes. Her bruises have faded, though the memory of them still lives in her eyes. And me? I plant herbs on the balcony. I send handwritten recipes to strangers who follow our baking page. I sleep without worry. I make tea in silence and enjoy every sip. Last week, a letter arrived. Real mail, the kind with a stamp and a little heart drawn next to my name. It was from Lily. She'd written it herself. "Dear Grandma," it began, "I hope you are happy. I miss you. I miss the smell of your cookies. I miss your hugs. I told Mommy and Daddy that. Mommy cried. Daddy went outside. I hope I see you again. Love, Lily." There was a drawing of us holding hands, two stick figures in front of what looked like my old house. She had drawn a big smile on my face. I held the letter for a long time. The edges were crumpled, her handwriting uneven, like she had tried very hard not to mess it up. The S in hugs was backward. Her G in grandma, too big for the line. But it was her voice, clear and small and piercing, like only a child's can be. I didn't cry at first. I just breathed. I sat in the sunspot on the floor near the window and let the warmth settle into my knees while I read it again slowly, line by line. Then I folded it, pressed it gently against my heart, and put it on the windowsill. But later that night, when the apartment was quiet and Anne was asleep, curled in her blanket, breath soft and steady, I read it one more time. And I cried. Not out of sorrow, but release. Tears came for everything I had kept inside for too long, for every time I had bit my tongue, for the look on Michael's face when he didn't defend me, for the silence I had mistaken as strength. I cried for Lily too, because children always carry the weight of what adults refuse to fix, but I didn't regret leaving. And that's the difference between grief and guilt. Grief says, I miss what I loved. Guilt says, I should have stayed. I had carried both for years. That night, I finally set one down. The next morning, I got up before sunrise. I boiled water, sliced lemons, poured Anne a cup of tea she would find when she woke. Then I sat down at our little kitchen table and wrote back. Dear Lily, I began. I miss you too. I told her my cookies still smelled the same, that I had started growing basil and lavender, and sometimes I bake cinnamon bread just for the smell of it. I told her the beach here is soft and quiet, and the seagulls are pushy little things that always want your toast. I didn't mention the house, or her parents. That wasn't her burden to carry. She was just a child, and children deserved to feel wanted, not wedged between grown-up shame and silence. I sealed the envelope and added a little pressed flower inside, a dried violet, an ant I had picked on a walk. I wrote, To Lily, with love, in my neatest script, even though my hand shook a little. As I placed it in the mailbox, I thought of all the things I'd left behind and all the things I'd reclaimed. My voice, my dignity, my place. Though for years I had shrunk myself into corners, quieted my thoughts, convinced myself that being needed was the same as being loved. But it's not. Love doesn't leave bruises. It doesn't call you names in the dark. It doesn't slap your hand away when you spill soup or call you dead weight in the room you paid for. Love stays. Love speaks. Love sees. And now I walk under the sun with my daughter beside me, and not a single step is quiet. We are loud in our living, in our healing. And as seashells now, she sells little jars of sand and poems on cardstock, and people buy them, not because they need them, but because you can feel her heart in them. She sings when she cooks, sometimes off-key, and we both laugh so hard we can't finish our rice. We planted rosemary last weekend. She said it was for protection. I told her she didn't need protection anymore. She has herself now. And me. Sometimes we sit on the porch and play old music. She reads me articles she finds online, and I tell her stories I'd never had the voice to share before. I used to live like a shadow, apologizing for taking up space. Now I take up space, joyfully, deliberately. My laughter fills the kitchen. My words take time. My memories matter. Because I matter. I am not a burden. I never was. And if someone says otherwise, that's their weight to carry, not mine. Years passed, and the little apartment by the sea became more than just a refuge. It became a launch pad. And Elisande, I didn't just survive We lived. We learned to say yes to things we'd once been too tired, too sad, or too scared to try. We took small road trips at first. Just an old paper map, folded too many times. A thermos of coffee that always tasted slightly of cinnamon, and the radio turned low, playing songs that reminded me of youth. We drove through sleepy towns with crooked porches, into hills where fog kissed the treetops. We visited the Smoky Mountains in spring, flowers blooming like they had something to prove. We wandered through Savannah in the fall, where the sidewalks told stories if you listened. And once, on a wild whim, we flew to Oregon just to see the lavender fields bloom, rows and rows of purple stretching toward the sky like it owed them something. We laughed in motel rooms with leaky faucets and thin walls. We danced under gas station lights when the music was just right. We took blurry photos with strangers and slept under stars in places where no one knew our names. We weren't healing, we were blooming. We became women who collected experiences, not apologies, who told stories, not excuses. Each place we went, Anne brought a new sketchbook. I brought my journal. In those pages, we didn't write about what we'd lost. We wrote about who we had become. She drew sunsets and bridges, hands and shadows. I wrote about the sound of her laughter, about the smell of a bakery in Mississippi, about the woman I saw in the mirror who no longer apologized for aging. Sometimes we mailed Lily postcards with no return address, just notes about seagulls and sunrises, stickers of fish, drawings of flowers. We didn't know if she ever got them, but we hoped. We had made a home from nothing, and for the first time in a long time we felt rich. But the past has a way of chasing you, especially when it starts crumbling. One humid afternoon, I was kneading dough for a small batch of honey rolls. The window was open, the curtains fluttering, and the air smelled like salt and cinnamon. The phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then Anne's phone buzzed. Same number. Neither of us moved at first, just looked at each other. Then another call, then a voicemail, then silence, and finally picked up her phone, tapped the screen, and pressed play. It was Michael. His voice was different, hollow, urgent. "Mom! Anne, it's bad." His breath shook. "Clara and I, we made some mistakes. Gambling, some debts. We're being evicted, it's all falling apart. We don't know where to go." He paused. A long, choking silence. "Please, just call back. Please." He didn't sound angry. He didn't even sound ashamed. He just sounded lost. I looked at Anne. She didn't say a word. She opened her phone, blocked the number, and set it down. I did the same. There was no rage between us, no glee, no revenge, just a shared stillness, a silence that spoke louder than shouting ever could. We didn't need to talk about it, because the truth was simple. We had given them more than money, more than shelter, more than we should have. We had given them chances. We had given them years. We had given them ourselves. And when they had the chance to choose kindness, they chose power. When they could have stood up for love, they chose silence. Now they were drowning in the weight of their own making. And we had learned to swim without them. Sometimes I wondered if Clara still had the same tone when she spoke to service workers, if she ever looked back at that kitchen and remembered the woman she slapped, if Michael ever opened the pantry and thought of the macaroni pictures he used to make me for Mother's Day. I wondered, but only briefly, because those thoughts were theirs to carry now, not mine. Let the past chase its own shadow. Let the guilt sit in rooms where we no longer live. We had sunrises to catch, miles to go. We were no longer part of that story. We had written new ones, of roadmaps and rooftop breakfasts, of beachside markets and laughing until soup spilled on our knees. We had become the women they never believed we could be, free. And that's the thing no one tells you. Forgiveness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet morning with tea in hand where you finally breathe without waiting to be heard again. We forgave, not because they deserved it, but because we deserved peace. We just didn't return. There was nothing left to fix, nothing left to explain, and no one left to apologize to. If someone ever called you a burden, if they sighed when you entered the room or looked past you when you spoke, or rolled their eyes when you asked for something small, I want you to stop whatever you're doing and hear me now. You are not too much. You are not in the way. You are not the reason things fell apart. You are not dead weight. You are breath. You are memory. You are presence. You are the one who stayed up when no one else would, the one who paid the bills no one saw, who kept the house warm, the meals hot, the doors open, even when your own heart was breaking. You are a library of love and labor. Every wrinkle a story. Every scar a receipt. Every silence you've held a vault of strength. This world wouldn't survive without. You are not useless. You are not expired. You are not furniture to be shuffled when it's convenient. You are a witness to time, a vessel of wisdom, a survivor of silence. And if they've forgotten that, let them. Let them believe what they want to believe. Let them squirm beneath the weight of their ingratitude. Let them sit in the house you once cleaned, eat off the dishes you once bought, breathe in air you once made safe, and wonder why it all feels cold now. Because when a woman like you walks out of a room, really walks, she takes the warmth with her. And that chill, that ache in their bones they can't quite name, that's the absence of your grace. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your savings. You don't owe anyone your old age. And you certainly don't owe anyone your forgiveness if they haven't earned it. But if you do forgive, do it for yourself, so you can sleep with peace, so your hands no longer shake, so your breath no longer catches when you remember what was said behind your back. Do it so you can laugh again. Not the polite kind, but belly-deep, shoulder-shaking laughter that no one can take from you. Do it so you can sing in the kitchen again, dance barefoot in the hallway, write letters to grandchildren who remember the scent of your cookies, even when their parents don't deserve to. Do it because your story isn't over, because your last chapter hasn't been written, because you are still here, and there is nothing heavier than a woman who's carried the past and still chooses to stand tall. You don't need to shout. Wisdom doesn't shout. Wisdom waits and remembers. And when the time is right, wisdom speaks. So speak, even if it's just in your own journal, even if it's only with your actions. Say the words you never thought you could. I am not invisible. I am not yours to use. I am not a mistake to be tolerated. You are not a guest in your own life. You are the author of it. So write endings that make you proud. Write boundaries that hold. Write silence that speaks louder than any insult they whispered behind a closed door. If they only remember you when the bills come due. If they only call when they need saving. If they only see your worth after they've drained your heart dry. Then let your silence be the final answer. Let your leaving be the lesson. And if they cry, let them. Not because they miss you, but because they miss what they no longer deserve. Because the truth is this: some people never apologize. Some people never admit what they did. But some people, they live with the echo of your footsteps walking away. And that echo will be louder than anything you could have screamed. So to every woman who's been told she's a burden, to every mother erased, to every grandmother sidelined, to every wife replaced by convenience, to every daughter who dared to protect her mother when no one else would, I see you, I believe you, and I honor the weight you've carried. Let the guilt stay with those who earned it. You carry your peace. Share this story if you've ever been pushed aside, if you've ever been told to shrink, if you stayed silent when you should have been heard and still chose to rise. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories for more stories of quiet revenge, fierce love, and the kind of endings that don't beg for applause, just respect. Because some women don't break, they rebuild, and this time, they do it without permission.